Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. There's been a lot of changes that have been happening on the political landscape, some of them more subtle, but a lot of them very overt. But the biggest change that's taken place happens to be that you got black Americans who are actually demanding to be in charge of their own political affairs, and not have individuals who are pushed in front of them by the dominant society who we're told we have to choose from. Undoubtedly, the greatest sign of this seismic shift among the black electorate happens to be the fact that Barack Obama is getting taken to task, not by the white media, they love this guy, they invented this guy, but by black voters themselves, who are making it very clear that no, the Hillary Clinton defeat of 2016 wasn't some fluke. It was a direct response of the black electorate to 8 years of a do-nothing, nobody president who wasn't looking out for anyone except for himself. That's what the 2016 election was about. And the way that things are going, looks like we're primed to have a repeat of it this year. But what this says to us happens to be, this is the result of having a whole bunch of tethers who are in positions they shouldn't be in, like Barack Obama, the king of the tethers, Kamala Harris, who is fighting to be the queen, and Stephen Horsford. He's the current head of the Congressional Black Caucus. He himself is an immigrant. Go back on this YouTube channel into the archives and you'll see where I listed the members of the CBC who are new to the U.S. or at most first-generation immigrants. And this Horsford character, he's been going hard in the paint to legalize any and everyone regardless of whether they're illegal aliens or not. As far as he's concerned, there's no room for black empowerment, but there's going to be a lot of room for immigrant empowerment. Some of the Democratic shills are getting desperate, though, since they know that the black media is all about cutting through the rhetoric and talking points and finding out what the truth is. So when Kamala was presenting her so-called plan for black men, the first thing we did was point out how adamantly she declared that she won't do anything that only benefits black people. So that told us right off the bat her plan for black men had to be a fraud, because if there's one thing we know about Kamala Harris, about the only truthful thing she's ever said is she's not going to do anything for black people. So the plan was clearly a lift-all-boats fraud. That's what her plan for black men is. The same Democrat platform of policies that are going to be open to and hence benefiting everyone, and by doing so maintain the racial wealth gap. Kamala was just putting the phrase black men in the title as her cynical ploy to see if anyone would be dumb enough to believe her this time. The shills and plants, though, they've been claiming that this isn't true, that she's going to be doing things just for black men, and that's why we got to turn out before she even actually does them. Well, let's look at the Harris campaign platform, and let's see if that's true. When you go to Kamala Harris's current presidential website, they've got an 82-page digital book that details Kamala's plans for America. And on page 51 of the PDF file, it talks about her plan to grow all small businesses in America. And it says that she plans to implement what she calls a small business expansion fund, which would give entrepreneurs low and zero-interest loans. Yeah, that sounds a lot like that $1,025,000 loans to black entrepreneurs and others that she was talking about on her website. Remember that phrase, black entrepreneurs and others? Well, now you know who the others are. Everybody in America who's not black. That way, the racial wealth gap has to be maintained at all costs. So for those of you shills and plants who are trying to tell us that Kamala Harris's proposal for $1,025,000 loans to black entrepreneurs, that was some sort of new idea, no, it wasn't. It's just simply her giving a small bit of more detail to her small business expansion fund idea, which isn't much of an idea at all. I mean, she was telling everyone from the jump what the scam was. Now, another point that she was talking about was she said that she would support a regulatory framework for cryptocurrencies and other digital assets. Remember that phrase, other digital assets. So when black men invest, these assets are protected. Now, when you look at Harris's 82-page outline plan for America, it says that she will, quote, encourage innovative technologies like AI and digital assets while protecting our consumers and investors. So there's that phrase, digital assets again. She doesn't say crypto in this entire 82-page document. Notice that? That's deliberate. It's because the government's not exactly trying to prop up what's seen as a rival currency to the dollar, especially one whose entire branding is that it's unregulated. And yet in Kamala's website campaign book, it says that she will encourage digital assets while protecting consumers. So what that shows you is her whole idea about how she was going to be protecting black men's digital assets. This is just the same thing that she says she's going to do for everyone. Now, I'm not going to give a point-by-point breakdown about how all of those 5 or so points for black men that she had in her so-called plan are nothing more than a slight rewording of the general policies that she's got on her website altogether. I think the point is made. What Harris was feebly trying to present as being a well-thought-out proposal of bold, innovative ideas meant to empower black men is just Kamala Harris's basic plan, one that already existed long before her current black voter crisis. She's just taking the basic policies from her website, inserting the phrase black men at the front of each one of them, and then waiting to see who'll be gullible enough to actually think she's being sincere. So no matter what the shills, the plants, or these white media bootlicks may try to tell you, when Kamala Harris said she's not going to do anything that only benefits black people, that's exactly what she meant. Meanwhile, she's making sure to take care of everybody else by doing things that only benefit them. The U.S. has a ton of programs and money ready and waiting for immigrants to the U.S., legal or not. Things that black Americans have never had access to. This is how white supremacy engineers the leapfrogging of all these other groups over black Americans. As soon as they show up here, by whatever means, they immediately get housing on the government's dime, money for education, and all of it based on being immigrants. That's the qualification. And these immigrants, after having gotten hundreds of thousands of dollars in free U.S. money just handed to them, they turn to black Americans and say that fiction about how they came to the U.S. with no money and why they worked for an education and to start a business. All they actually did was fill out some forms. In many cases, you got these government bureaucrats who fill out the forms for them. Regardless, the rest is done for them by the system. To be a tether is to also be a coward, which is why Barack Obama is half white, and yet he has not and would never go up to white voters, Republican, Democrat, or otherwise, and wag his finger at them like he did at black men. He would never do that, because he's a coward. It's easy to wag your finger at the most powerless segment of the society, especially when you've already decided to do the mental math that these people don't make big donations to your campaigns anyway, so apparently they can't hurt you, because only money matters in a campaign, right? Problem with that line of thinking is, dollars can't vote. So your millionaire and billionaire friends, they only got one vote like everybody else. Their fortunes don't equate to 1 billion votes. Never have, never will. And Kamala Harris's benign neglect of the black community is coming back to bite her hard. She made sure that there was an Asian hate crime law passed while she's been in office for the last 4 years. Meanwhile, black Americans are the majority of hate crimes victims, and she's done nothing for us, hasn't even proposed an anti-black hate crime law. It's not in her plan for black men. It's not in her basic do-nothing plan for America. But then again, that's what she said. It's the only truthful thing she ever said. She wasn't going to do anything that only benefits black people. How did we get to this point? Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, show me a group's strongest trait, and on the flip side, I'll show you their weakest. Our greatest strength is that we survived the most brutal regime of racial oppression in human history. Nothing else even comes close to what we've endured. We, a small, brutally oppressed minority, managed to do what entire nations of black people in Africa and the Caribbean couldn't do, except for Haiti briefly. We survived by becoming united. We pioneered a definition of black, one that crossed all pre-existing lines. It didn't matter where your folks came from, didn't matter what you believed. What mattered was we were all being oppressed by the same enemy. So we had to forge a new identity based on what we have in common. And that was so powerful. That is the crucial element that's been missing outside the U.S., be it in the Caribbean or be it in Africa. Over in those places, you still got people trying to be tribalized, trying to claim that their little group or their little enclave is better than everyone else, even at this late date. We, on the other hand, welcome and supported all black people, whether they were from here or from abroad. As long as you're black, that's what matters, because that's the tie that binds. That's what made our rise possible. However, there was a huge downside to the all-encompassing definition of black that we had pioneered, and that downside is the same unconditional acceptance and support that we gave to one another, the tethers would be able to exploit when they showed up. And because we did not oppose them, we set the stage for white power to put these bootlicks in high position, even in organizations that we're supposed to be running. We managed to establish a real loyalty system here. But the problem was that we assumed everyone was loyal to fighting white supremacy just because we were. And what we found out is that's not true at all. So what comes now is that we have to start decoupling ourselves from these tethers. The practice of making sure that real benefits accrue to our lineage will begin with us. That being the case, People should be wearing their lineage on their sleeve, literally if necessary. Now, of course, you're going to be having the individuals who have been eating off of white supremacy, placing them in positions over us, saying that we're being divisive. The reality is they were the ones who are being divisive. We're just making it official. The first benefit that is supposed to accrue to the lineage is being able to speak for your group and speak accurately to your group's interests. Thinking and acting for ourselves starts by choosing our own representatives. That's part of what we've been getting wrong. We got the entire voting process backwards. The way they're supposed to work is you're supposed to choose who the candidate is for yourself based on whether or not you found people who are willing to stand up for what's in your interest. From there, you go ahead and make sure that they get on the ballot. Then the final step is to vote. We've had it backwards. We've been voting first, then trying to figure out who the hell do we let get elected into office. And then we waste years trying to beg them, coerce them, plead with them, shame them, whatever, to do what they said they were going to do, or rather what they misled us and alluded that they would do, because they never actually say it. Just look at the examples that I cited for you earlier about how Kamala Harris's so-called plan for black men is nothing more than a pathetic rewording of her general plan for all of America. That's how these guys operate. They'll actually have the gall to say, why, this is a plan for black people, don't you know? And then they'll sit back and wait to see if you let your imagination fill in the gaps, because that's what happens when people get conned. The con man basically lets the mark con themselves. We've had enough of playing the fool for anyone, or for letting anybody bring fools amongst us. Some of us are slowly but surely starting to figure it out. It's like having a boat tied to a dock. If you want to be free to chart your own course, then you got no choice but to cut the tether loose. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Darnell Henderson, Jacques Hargett, Kenneth Johnson, Mark Stroud, and Sean. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.